listening to pause. We pause for a second or two. This is episode 117, Devoid of Soul. In these times in which we live right now, much focus, much attention, almost all attention in our public discourse is dedicated to our surface, to what can be seen on the surface, to anything material. If we start with politics, what we think of as the left-right spectrum, if you go all the way to the far left and if you go all the way to the far right, everything is still about everything material. It's about things. If we look at our daily lives, what we focus on, what we place our attention on a daily basis, it's a lot about appearances. It's a lot about technology. It's a lot about social markers. It's a lot about owning things. Owning beautiful, new, fancy things. We live in materialistic times, vain times. And yes, life is materialistic, life is vain, but that is only half of it. Material life is half of everything. Material life is our visible life, what we can see with our naked eye, what is very obvious to all of us. Today's episode is called Devoid of Soul. And the Polaroid for today is specific skill melody. Melody and soul are interchangeable. Soul is what is invisible but greatly affects us. Soul is what we cannot see in an obvious way, but nonetheless is there. And in these times, we pay no attention to the invisible aspects of life. We pay no attention to the more subtle nuances to life. We are in a time that is devoid of soul. In such a time, when we pay no attention to soul, when we pay no attention to the invisible half of life, in such a time, the invisible part of life does not go away. It is still there. But as we have turned our backs to this invisible half of life, we become vulnerable. When we pause for a moment, when we pause for a second or two and think about the collective fears of our time. We fear pandemics. We fear global warming. We fear terrorism. We fear populism. We fear racism. We fear war. All of these different fears that we carry as a collective are fears that are invisible. We fear invisible phenomena. As we have turned our backs on the invisible aspect of life, we fear the invisible. As we have turned our backs on soul, we become easy to manipulate. We become fertile soil for anyone who wants to plant fears into us. We become fragile. Instead, when we spend time with soul, when we spend time with the invisible, when we spend time with pausing, when you listen to this podcast, for example, when you spend time with the pause framework, then we develop a relationship to the invisible, to soul, to melody, the melody to our life. And as we do that, the invisible gets less and less scary. We get to know soul such as it is. And then, when we are fed different fears, the fears will feel absurd because we know the invisible. We cannot be scared about the invisible because we know it. We know it such as it is, such as soul. As we move on now, in these times we live in, these different fears that we have learned, fear of pandemics, fear of global warming, fear of terrorism, fear of racism, fear of war. As we move on now, these different fears will play out. Some of them might become self-fulfilling and others won't. And the end result of all of this is that we will come face to face with the invisible that we have turned our backs to for so long. All these years, decades of having turned our backs to the soul of life and only focused on the material, no matter if it's the left or the right or the middle, doesn't matter, it's material nonetheless. We will have to face the invisible that we have been putting away. It will be rough. It will hurt. We will lose many things. And as this is playing out, the invisible will once again come into our lives, not in the way we expected it to, but it will enter our lives. Soul will come back. And then, as our fears play out, soul will again let us know what a full life feels like. And then the material aspect to life, the material half, the superficial half, will make more sense because it will also be filled with its other half, soul. And then specific skill melody will become easy. Our long-term specific skill to feel like our life has melody, that our life makes sense, that our life feels vivid. If we already now wish to find our way back to soul, the right way to do it is not to try to force it, not to try to do too much too quick. The right way to do it is to pause for a second or two, and then slowly in our daily lives start coming back to it. One way is to listen to this podcast and just slowly allowing the soul aspect of life come back to you. And then in time it will start feeling natural again. It will take some time, it doesn't happen overnight, but that is a good way to do it. The pause framework is sort of like different entrance points into soul. And these different entrance points offer different situations where we might find ourselves at the moment. Some of us feel worn out. Some of us feel confused. Some of us are worried about our future, our long-term situation. Some of us are afraid of acute, sudden situations. And some of us just long for sleep and predictability. No matter where we are, there is an entrance point into soul, into pausing, into this invisible realm, this invisible half of life. This is the right way to do it. Slowly, surely, not forcing it, just allowing it to happen in its own good time. And then just see where it takes us. Soul is vast, so naturally it takes its own time to find its way back to us and complement the already materialistic half that we already have. That's it for today. Thank you.